Hello, my educator family. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Strategy Sunday where we plan for the week ahead to empower and to educate our students. I am Carla Boswell-Lewis, Director for Strategic Educational Consultancy Services, where my only mission is to empower you, our educators. For the month of May, we'll be looking at online lesson planning. We'll be sharing with you tips for online lesson planning. How do you go about planning your lesson? What are the steps that should be taken? We look at the 4 C's for lesson planning, among many other things. We have heard your plea, we have seen your emails and the feedback from surveys that we have done, which would indicate to us that as educators, you'd like to get some information on how you can plan effectively for the online classroom. And so today I will be sharing with you tips for online lesson planning. How do you go about planning for the virtual classroom? Of course, the virtual classroom is different from the physical classroom, and so you have to take in a variety of factors in order to plan effective lessons. So, what are the benefits of a well designed online lesson plan? The first thing is that it promotes student learning. Yes, it helps the students to learn more. You see their growth once it is well designed. It also promotes retention because the aim of the lesson planning, whether it is physical or virtual, is that the students are able to learn and to grasp, and not only retention as it relates to the information, but also retention for your classroom. Many educators will say, my students are not coming on to class, they're not participating, and that is because your lesson plan is not well designed, and so you're not able to retain your students in your classroom. It is true. And also it provides an engagement. It provides engagement and it also promotes engagement within the classroom. So let's look at our first tip as we think about the online lesson planning. How do we go about doing that? The first one is that you should understand your students. What do we mean by understanding your students? You have to be aware of the strengths, the weaknesses, and the patterns of learning, such as learning styles. You need to know the students' learning styles. If you are not privy to such information, then you will need to analyze and evaluate their existing knowledge. It could be a quiz or a simple activity that you give to see how well they understand what's the knowledge that they have prior to coming to your class. And very importantly, educators, you can also give your students a learning style quiz, which will help you to set the tone, to know the type of learners that you have before you. And you should also be documenting that to ensure that you are aware of it. And so you can go to a very simple and easy, and I find it very effective, is at Education Planner. There's an assessment there that you can give to your students to know their learning styles, right? Now, the second tip that we'll be looking at is that we need to set clear objectives. There must be clear objectives. You should focus on what students will achieve during and at the end of the session. So I know usually educators, when you are in the physical classroom, you may have 3 or 4 objectives, with specific objectives that is for your lesson. But this is now the virtual classroom, and you will have to realize that the number of objectives that you can accomplish in one class when you were in the physical classroom, you will not be able to accomplish all 4 in the virtual classroom. It could be possible, but then you'd have to think about shortening the time that you spend on each objective, and that would not be effective. So I always say it is better to have 2 or even 1, depending on your session allotment. You have 1 or 2 and you go through it so well. You give it a thorough walkthrough, a thorough teaching approach. You go deep with the 1 or the two, and the student grasp it so well that you don't have to reteach. But if you set out with 4 or 5 and you just hurry through it, you're going to find that when you get to the evaluation, when you're giving the students or they're giving them assessment or a quiz, you're going to find that they're not going to be doing well because you'd have rushed through the content. Right? The second part of setting clear objectives is that you have to ensure that your content reflects the objectives. If you say that you are defining, then it means definitely that if the students are defining, then you need to have the definition. You need to take them through that whole approach instead of going round and around, right? So you have to ensure that the content that you have, it reflects the objectives. Good. The third one is for you to utilize lots of visuals. What do we mean by utilizing lots of visuals? You replace words with videos. You use graphic organizers. You use online whiteboards. You use presentations with narration like Prezi. And you also utilize visual props. What this does is to help the students secure a picture to the word, or to the phrases, or to the content being presented. And yes, persons will say, but what if they're not visual learners? Remember that whether or not they're visual or tactile or they are auditory, whatever it is, remember that they tend to retain more of what they see than what they hear. And so because they're in the online setting, you know that sometimes at home it may not be so conducive on certain days that they're able to hear clearly. Sometimes the internet fluctuates, right? There's not proper connection, and so it will take away the amount of talking that you do. It's going to take away from the students. But when they are seeing, it is better for them. So ensure that you're utilizing your visuals. The next strategy that you want to look at as you plan for your online lesson is that you keep the teaching time short. And you may say, really? But I'm given 1 hour to teach a class and I have to ensure that I'm teaching for the hour. This is where you should exert some amount of autonomy as the manager of your classroom, and knowing your students and knowing very well what your objectives are. Then you are going to be tailoring your teaching time to that you're going to be tailoring your teaching time to meet those demands and those needs. Remember, we speak about brain-based learning. We had two beautiful days of training session on brain-based learning. Every 15 minutes, the brain needs relaxation. So it takes in as much as it can for 15 minutes, and you will find that because of circumstances, there are some students that may go for a shorter time. And so imagine the overload that will be on them when you're going on and on and on. We're not saying to teach 15 minutes and that's it. No, 15 minutes and there's a break, there's an activity, there's something to release their minds, to release the brain, to free it up a little bit so it can process what information is there and then move on. So you want to ensure if you have an hour to teach your class, that at least 40 minutes you are utilizing for teaching time with the breaks in between, and the rest of the time you can use to do some self-care with your students, find out how they're doing, check to see if they have grasped the content that you have just taught, give them some activities that will solidify the concepts that you just did with them in the classroom. So you want to ensure that you use a variety of visual elements, as we discussed earlier, to minimize the long talks, yes, and give them greater engagement time. You also want to segment your lesson. You can use blogs, you can use presentations so that they can view after class and read it at their own pace as well. So instead of teaching all the content for the 1 hour, You are teaching for half an hour, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and then you're giving them time to grasp the content, to relate to you, to do some activities, or that they can use to start going over the materials that you have just presented. Because they learn differently. They're not all going to be at the same pace. They will follow along, but there are some learners that will need time to go over the material. And as the teacher in the classroom, you need to instill that reflective time with the students. Teach them to be reflective students so that after class and they get their notes, that they are able to go back through the notes, set aside time to go through the notes and to ensure that they have grasped the information. Now, another interesting part of keeping the teaching time short is to implement the flipped classroom. And if we are familiar with that strategy, or if you're not familiar with it, now is a good time for you to learn it. So, what you would do before class, the students are reading. Yes, they are going over materials, they are watching videos, they are making their presentations, they're doing many things that will help them to be prepared for the class. Now, when you're in class, you could use that time as an engagement or an activity time where you're giving them activities to help you as an educator to see how well they have grasped the information that you gave to them to be done outside of class. And as well, it is also a moment to help them to see where they are and what they need to do. Sadly, or a good thing, could be both, is that for students who may not have had the opportunity to go through the material, when they get to class, they are now forced to do that to go through that information, because they're going to realize that they cannot participate as how they would want to because they have missed out. And so it becomes a part of them, and they will now know that, all right, when I go to class, teacher may use the flipped classroom. I don't want to be left out. So let me read ahead as at all times, right? So you want to ensure that you keep the teaching time short. The next point that we will look at as we focus on online strategies, how we go about planning our lessons for the online classroom, is that you want to keep a clear and consistent structure. Yes, it keeps students engaged and focused. Also, at the beginning of the class, you'd want to outline all the requirements of the students from the beginning so the brain can process and act accordingly. I'm going to share an example with you. In my class, I have my students know how I teach. They pick up because I'm as best as I can, I'm trying to be consistent with them. And because I utilize the brain-based teaching approach, where I begin with the what at all times, the what, getting them to understand from the get-go where we're going, the what, the why from the beginning. So if I'm starting a new topic, or when I get into class and I say to them, okay, we're going to be looking at this today, you know what my students do? They start to research for the definition automatically. And some of them will have it prepared and ready to just share with me, because they know that is how I teach. I will not take them through a lesson without not having them understand clearly what is it that you are going to be learning about. Why is it necessary for you to learn about it? So they are preparing. You can do the same, because what it does, it helps the brain to be organized. Really, if the brain is what the students use to learn, then as educators, as teachers, you need to understand how it works and use it to help your students, right? So you want to ensure that there is clear and consistent structure. Another part of the clear and consistent structure, and if you realize I am having a little bit of difficulty just getting the slide going. All right, so a part of keeping a clear and consistent structure is to keep a central location to store all lesson materials and assignments. It could be in Google Drive, and if you utilize Google Classroom, you can organize it like folders. Just as how you'd organize your desk, you can do the same thing. You have your class, you organize by unit or by topic, you put in your assignments, you put in all the materials that are related to that topic. So when the students go in, they know exactly where to retrieve the information. But what some educators tend to do, maybe because they have not grasped fully how to utilize the Google Classroom, they just post all the materials, and so it is difficult for the student when they go to search to retrieve notes or to retrieve an activity that you may have given to them, because it is all over. So you want to group, you want to put your content into units, into folders that they know, okay, unit 1, kitchen planning and design, and all the activities are there. You're looking at Caribbean history, you're looking at the TANOs for social studies, you have it in the folder TANOs, and all the activities and assignment and quiz is stored right there. So when they need to go back, maybe they'll miss out on something, they know exactly where to go. You also would like to create a checklist of what content you teach each week or day or for the teaching cycle. And in having that checklist, you want to also include the assignments they will be doing and the resources and tools they can refer to. And educators, it is just a matter of being consistent. And once you start to practice these things, you'll realize how easy it becomes. For my students, they have a syllabus. There's we for CSEC, there's a syllabus. But what I do as an educator, I go in and I uncover what is there. I pin what can be pinned together, and I teach it that way. And my students have a guideline, right? So they have a guideline that shows them, for unit 1, this is what I'll be looking at. These are the topics, these are the assignments, these are the due dates. And as we go through, they stick off. We may have to make adjustments, but then they have something that they can relate to, right? So you want to ensure that you are having that level of consistency for your students. You are keeping clear and consistent organization for your students. The next part of planning for the online classroom, when you look at your lesson plan, is that you want to add assignments and homework. Some persons will say, what's the sense of giving them assignments and homework and stressing them out? Educators, if it is even once per week or twice per week, you are giving them the assignments and homework to be done. This helps with evaluating what students have learned. And we have the popular live worksheets that you can utilize, that they are there. You give it to the students, but remember, again, it must be aligned to your objectives and the content that you have taught them. So it's there, and you may be able to find it. It could be even a game, a Kahoot, Quizlet, something that is already there that you can pull down and utilize. Nothing is wrong with collaborating. Nothing is wrong with using materials from someone else, once it is that you're giving credit to the source, so you're not claiming it as your own. And so you work smarter and not harder. Just ensure that it is aligned to the objectives. Pull it up and give it to the students. The answers are already plugged in. You will see the grade that the students receive, and you document that, and you ask them to save it, to keep it, so that they can use it to go over as they revise for a quiz or an exam that will be coming up. Right? So this helps them to evaluate themselves as well. And you'll also see wherein you may need to reteach or go over some concepts. Let them work collaboratively in groups. Don't teach them to be selfish and to be individualized. Now is a good time for them to team up outside of class time, make a video, complete a project, do a research, and this will help. Because I know some persons will say, but if I give them quiz, somebody will be there to assist them. If I give them an online test, maybe they're cheating, they're looking at another browser, or they're going through their books. So if you have any doubts where that is concerned, give them research. Let them go and do research and do presentations and do videos and speeches. Take them up the notch. Take them from just the simple recall and let them analyze the synthesize evaluation. Let them do that. That will be a true reflection of what the students have grasped, because now they are not just answering questions, but they have to synthesize. They have to put what they have learned in class with real life situations, with another colleague or another student rather, or they will have to read and summarize and put that together and present it. And nothing is wrong with that, right? So you may want to look at that as you plan your lessons, right? So ensure that you are giving them something that you can use to help them to grasp the content that is being taught and to do their best. Now, finally, after you have done everything, after you realize that you now understand your students, you're utilizing your visuals, right? You're organizing the material, you are adding the homework, you're helping them to reflect, as you're helping them to participate, to stay focused in class, you're shortening your teaching time. You now need to evaluate, reflect, and revise. A lesson plan is not complete until you have evaluated the lesson taught. And so you evaluate, what are you evaluating for? And in the online setting, you're evaluating the strategies that you have utilized, you're looking at the content that was given, you're looking at the tools that you use to help you to bring across the content to the students, and this will help you to improve the learning environment of your students. You are now able, after you have evaluated, to reflect. What could I have done differently? How could I have incorporated a different approach? What do I need to do as I plan for the future? Let me revise and see, did I accomplish all the objectives? What do I need to reteach? These are the questions that you are reflecting on as an educator in the classroom. So you evaluate, then you reflect, and then you revise. So you're planning, you're strategizing for the way forward. Now, a good lesson plan model, an instructional a lesson plan model that has been designed specifically for online teaching and learning as it relates to selecting strategies and content and so on, is the ADDIE model. Now, the ADDIE model looks at you analyzing, then you design, then you develop, then you implement, and then you evaluate, right? So you're using this to look back at the strategies and the content and the tools that you have utilized. And never forget, always ask students to provide feedback. Sometimes it may be blunt, it may be maybe not something that you want to hear, but it will help you. So your students will say, Miss, you went too fast with that topic, or Miss, I don't understand what you're saying, or Miss, I sometimes I'm getting lost. I'm not able to, as soon as I understand a concept, you move on to something a little bit too fast. And so it will help you educators to be able to plan effectively for your students and to meet your students' needs, right? So as you plan for the online learning, as you look at your lesson plan, these are the strategies that can help you to plan for your class, to plan your lesson, and to ensure that what you're doing will be effective. So as we close out, this is Strategic Educational Consultancy Services, where we are empowering you, our educators. We'll see you on Thursday when we look at Analysis Thursday. We see what were the actionable tips that we have given to you, the strategies. What else can be added? How can you twist it? How can you turn it to meet your context? Because remember, when we're giving you these tips, you also have to take it as it relates to your context. Thank you so much, educators. Remember, if you like this video, you want to hear more about online lesson planning, hit up the like button, hit the subscribe button if you have not yet done so you can continue to get this valuable information. And let me remind my primary and early childhood educators, please look out via Instagram and Facebook, where we're going to be engaging with the leading, the only institute that deals with whole brain teaching, that will be partnering with them to get 25 Jamaican teachers to be trained in the whole brain teaching strategy that you can utilize to enhance the teaching learning approach for your students. Take care and all.